State University and a sociologist who has given us considerable information dealing with some of the problems faced by African American youth today. As a matter of fact, Dr. Sanford, you will recall that we call this the challenges facing African American youth. And what I'd like for you to do is to sort of look at it from your perspective and talk about the economic, social, political kind of things that you think that our audience ought to be aware of this morning.
Yes, and as we made reference to a few minutes ago of the war on poverty with President Johnson, presently our President Barack Obama still saw this as a very significant problem here in the United States. He calls it the promise zones, where he targeted 20 different locations and specifically going into 5 now to try to do something about this. These areas that he's looking at is targeting the topic of today, dealing with urbanism here in America, and how in many of those central cities throughout the United States, they really have a disproportionate amount of people that live there, youth in particular, that are experiencing poverty. And when we think about the social stratification system and the economic zone and where they are located, it impacts the family, it impacts the church, it impacts their growth. So we're talking about from the very early ages of birth all the way through adolescence, through young adulthood and entering undergraduate schools. They've been impacted. So you see a disproportionate amount of educational growth that is poor. You find high crime in those areas. And so it's still a problem that we have today as we had many, many years ago. And when we think in terms of this, we're thinking in terms of 50 years ago and maybe make a comparison now and how problems still exist. But I'd like to try to share a model of looking at that 244 years of enslavement and how some of the institutions were created within our culture here in America that has still persisted over that long period of time. And although we still have a lot of remnants of improvement, I think even our president, as he has those 5 promise zones, recognizes there's still a lot of economic impoverishment here in America. And as a result of slavery to now, there are a lot of people that are still first generation going into undergraduate school. You still have large numbers of people who are disproportionately in prison without fathers. And even as President Johnson said, he came out of poverty. I think President Obama would be the first to say he grew up with a single parent. So he has a sensitivity to those needs. And he understands that others that live in those situations are having desperate problems. And out of that, he's suggesting that if there's anyone that wants to work hard and do well, that they should have an opportunity to do it, thinking in terms of the American dream.
That's it.
And in these 5 zones, he's certainly trying to indicate that if people can come up with ideas about how to reduce poverty, how to reduce this problem we're thinking with urban youth, within the African American community, as well as other ethnic groups, as well as the majority group, that the government will be willing to support them in doing it. But yes, Dr. Haney, it's a grave problem that still exists, not only in urban areas, but also in rural areas. Right here in the state of Tennessee, right here in North Nashville, there are just problems that are very much connected to poverty, that's very much connected to the remnants of those things and breaking up families, not having people at home after school, latchkey kids, not having the right type of nourishment for children to be socialized in an environment where they can prosper. But given a change in that, I think there can be a great improvement. So I think this is a stimulus to doing it. And I love your ending of your last segment by saying this, for those that doubt that the war on poverty was a failure, that it would have been worse if it had not have had that insight from that particular president coming out of John Kennedy's era to do something about the issues in America. And this just shows us how statistically we are still in very dire need of help for poverty issues and how they are related to a lot of the social issues and concerns of the African American community and other communities.
And so in a real sense, would you say that it's cost effective to produce, you know, we always argue about the government involvement and whether or not how the government is spending its money and et cetera. Would you say that from an economic point of view that it would be cost effective to produce such programs as the Job Corps program for the longest, as CETA and some of the other programs? Would you say that these programs lift people up out of poverty to such an extent that they are made taxpayers, law-abiding citizens, and et cetera, that it seems to me it would be cost-effective for the government to become involved in this kind of activity. What would you say in reference to that?
Yeah, I would agree 100% on that. And it's interesting because I do know the counter-argument that people are looking at these things as set-asides. They want to take them away. Even with the arguments today on reducing the budgets, the first thing they want to do is to take away Head Start and core programs or anything that help those. But if you take those away, it's going to cause higher crime rate, higher every other ill that you have in society. When you look educationally, we are the most richest country in the world, but our citizens, meaning children and youth, are very low on education. Why? Because of poverty. So yes, if they had those programs, if they funded them, and as President Obama has said, any ideas that can be encouraged and developed that would help that issue, that they should be very much excited about doing it because it's going to certainly help people versus hurting people in the long run.
And so these are what you call prosperity zones.
And that's right. They call them the promise zones.
Promises zones.
Promise zones, yes.
And they've got them set up all across, the idea is to set them up all across the nation.
And that's correct. And for anybody that got brilliant ideas, it could be institutions of higher education, institutions of religions, nonprofit organizations that might be able to develop ideas about how to solve that problem. And if they're a good one and they're working and can do evaluations to show that they're effective, they said they should be funded and to help people. And both of us are professors, and all of us, we can probably look back on and have that student that would not have gone into engineering but was in Head Start. Someone saw that talent, they nourished it. He probably went back to the community without parents that had ever had that educational experience. But that program was very intervening in that person's life. Finished Tennessee State University, now they're prospering and doing very well as a good citizen of the United States.
And that's all over, that's in general, not only
right.
African American, Hispanics, majority groups, and all of these groups have been able to succeed because of the government being willing to take a chance on them in a real sense. Is that what we're saying?
That is exactly what we're saying.
It's cost effective. I mean,
it's very
it cuts down on the incarceration and all of those things that are generally. So I know you're going to talk about that, but it also cuts down on the incarceration and all of those other things that we're spending money on. But if we were willing to put money into these promise zones, that it would, in a real sense, serve as the war on poverty helped many of us back in an earlier period.
That's right.
And of course, we're going to take this first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.